Picture the most powerful military on Earth. Now picture an enemy who, instead of meeting it head-on, vanishes, marches his army 1,000 miles the wrong way, climbs a wall of frozen mountains no one believed an army could cross, dragging war elephants through the snow, and reappears behind his enemy's back, in their own homeland, where they thought they were untouchable. That enemy was Hannibal. The mountains were the Alps, and what he did next would become every Roman parent's nightmare for 100 years. This is the story of the man who brought elephants over the Alps to destroy Rome, and very nearly did. To understand Hannibal, you have to understand the hatred. He was born in Carthage, a magnificent trading empire on the coast of North Africa, and Rome's great rival for control of the ancient world. When Hannibal was a boy, Carthage and Rome fought a brutal 23-year war over the island of Sicily. Carthage lost, the terms were humiliating, and Hannibal's father, a general named Hamilcar, never forgave it. The story goes that before sailing off to war in Spain, Hamilcar took his 9-year-old son to a temple, placed the boy's hand on a sacrifice, and made him swear an oath that as long as he lived, he would never be a friend of Rome. Hannibal would spend the rest of his life keeping that promise. By the year 218 BC, Hannibal was a grown man and the commander of Carthage's armies in Spain, and he was ready to start a second war. But there was a problem. Rome ruled the sea. Any fleet sailing for Italy would be smashed before it ever reached the shore. So Hannibal looked at the map and made a decision so audacious the Romans never saw it coming. He would not go by sea at all. He would march overland, from Spain, across the south of France, and straight over the Alps to strike Italy from the north, through a back door everyone assumed was sealed shut by a wall of mountains. No army had ever done it. Most people did not believe it could be done. That was exactly why it would work. He set out with a staggering force, tens of thousands of infantry, thousands of cavalry, and 37 war elephants, living tanks that could shatter any line of men that dared to stand against them. They crossed the Pyrenees, they reached the Rhône, a wide and violent river, and somehow floated their terrified elephants across on enormous rafts, piled with earth and grass to fool the animals into boarding. The Roman scouts who spotted them could not believe their eyes. And still, the worst lay ahead. The Alps in autumn are a death trap. As Hannibal's army climbed into the high passes, everything turned against them. The temperature plunged, paths narrowed to ledges of ice barely wide enough for a single man, with sheer drops into white nothing. Hostile mountain tribes rolled boulders down onto the column and ambushed them in the dark. Men and pack animals lost their footing and vanished, screaming, into the chasms below. At one point, the way ahead was completely blocked by a landslide of rock, and as the story is told, Hannibal's engineers lit great fires against the stone and cracked it apart to carve a road straight through the mountain. For 15 days they climbed and bled and froze. By the time Hannibal led his survivors down the far side into the green plains of Italy, nearly half his army was gone. Tens of thousands of men dead in the mountains, most of the elephants dead. He had done the impossible, and it had nearly destroyed him. Now he had to face Rome with what was left. What happened next is why Roman mothers would frighten their children with his name for generations. Hannibal rebuilt his ranks with local tribes who hated Rome, and then he began to take the greatest military machine in the world apart, piece by piece. At a river called the Trebia, he lured a Roman army across freezing water and sprang a hidden trap, cutting them to ribbons. Months later, at Lake Trasimene, he did something even bolder. He hid his entire army in the fog and the hills along a narrow stretch of shore, and when the Romans marched into the gap, he sealed it shut behind them. It was the largest ambush in history. Thousands of Romans were driven into the lake and drowned in their own armor. An entire army, with its commander, gone in a single morning. And then came Cannae. In 216 BC, Rome had had enough. They raised the largest army they had ever assembled, around 80,000 men, and sent it to crush Hannibal once and for all. Hannibal had barely 50,000. He should have lost. Instead, he set a trap so perfect that it is still taught in military academies today, more than 2,000 years later. He deliberately made his own center weak. As the massive Roman force pushed forward, his line bent backward, not breaking, just bending, like a bow being drawn tight. The Romans were certain they were winning. They pressed deeper and deeper into the curve. And then Hannibal sprang it. His cavalry swept around the rear, his veterans closed in from both flanks, and the largest army in Roman history suddenly found itself surrounded on every side, packed so tightly the men could barely raise their swords. It was not a battle anymore, it was a slaughter. In a single day, tens of thousands of Romans were killed. By some accounts, 50,000 or more. It remains one of the bloodiest days in the history of warfare. Rome lost a fifth of its grown men in an afternoon. After Cannae, Rome was on its knees. Hannibal roamed Italy as its master, undefeated for years. Hannibal at the gates became Roman shorthand for absolute terror. By every measure, he had won. And yet, he could not finish it. Here is the tragedy at the heart of Hannibal's story. He could destroy any army Rome threw at him, but he could not take the city of Rome itself. He had no siege engines and not nearly enough men to surround it. So he begged Carthage for reinforcements, but the jealous politicians back home, who feared his power as much as Rome did, sent him almost nothing. And so the greatest general of the age was left stranded deep in enemy country, brilliant and unbeatable and slowly running out of everything. And Rome, for all its losses, learned. They stopped fighting him the way he wanted them to. A cautious commander named Fabius refused to give Hannibal the great battle he craved. He shadowed him, harassed him, and waited, trading land for time. Rome simply outlasted him. Then Rome did to Carthage exactly what Hannibal had done to Rome. A young Roman general named Scipio carried the war across the sea to North Africa, straight at Carthage's heart. Carthage panicked and called Hannibal home to save it. After 15 years on enemy soil, he returned to fight the one battle he could not afford to lose. At a place called Zama, the two greatest commanders of the age finally met face to face, and Scipio had studied his enemy well. When Hannibal sent his war elephants charging, Scipio's men simply opened wide lanes in their ranks and let the panicked beasts thunder harmlessly through. Then he turned Hannibal's own encirclement against him. For the first time in his life, on the soil of his own homeland, Hannibal lost. Carthage surrendered. The war was over. Hannibal survived the battle, but Rome would never feel safe while he still drew breath. They hunted him for the rest of his life, from kingdom to kingdom across the ancient world. And finally, cornered, with Roman soldiers closing in to drag him away in chains, the man who had once terrified an empire chose his own ending. He drank poison rather than be paraded through the streets of Rome. His last words, by one account, were a final act of defiance, that he would relieve the Romans of the long anxiety they had suffered, waiting for the death of one old man. He never conquered Rome, but he humbled it like no one before or since. A single man who turned the impossible into a weapon, dragged elephants over the roof of the world, and won victories that are still studied 2,000 years later. Rome would go on to rule the world, but it never ever forgot the years it spent staring fearfully up at the mountains, waiting for Hannibal to come down. If you like history where one person bends the impossible to their will, subscribe and stick around. I'll see you in the past.